Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. There was a time when I thought I had the perfect marriage. I know, cliché, but Brittany had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she smiled. Back then, it felt like that smile was for me. We'd build our lives from the ground up. She climbed the corporate ladder in recruiting, and I turned my passion for photography into a full-fledged wedding studio. People envied us. At least, that's what I told myself. But envy fades when you're the one left sitting at home every night wondering why your wife won't look you in the eyes anymore. I was the stay-at-home dad, a choice we both agreed on when our daughter was born. My studio allowed flexibility, and Brittany's job required travel. I wasn't bitter about that. Not at first. I packed lunches, cleaned up messes, shot weekend weddings, and played the part. But the cracks weren't hard to notice once I stopped lying to myself. The first sign? Her tone. "You wouldn't get it, Jason," she said one night at dinner. I had asked what the new client meeting was about, just to make conversation. It's complicated. Real marketing stuff, not just editing pretty pictures. I forced a smile, tried to laugh it off. But our daughter, sitting at the table between us, paused mid-bite and glanced at me with wide eyes, sensing the shift. Another night, at her parents' house, the real jab came. Her dad was asking me about business, and I mentioned I was doing more second shooter gigs lately since Brittany's schedule was so hectic. She cut in with a laugh. "Second shooter? Please. Jason's more of a house manager these days." Her mother chuckled. Her father didn't. I sat there smiling through my teeth, rage boiling just beneath the surface. I should have spoken up right then. Should have corrected her. But I stayed quiet, nodded along, let her humiliate me in front of the people who used to respect me. That night in the car, I tried to bring it up. That comment about me being a house manager. "Why'd you say it like that?" She didn't even look away from her phone. "It was a joke, Jason. Lighten up." It didn't feel like a joke. She sighed. "You're so sensitive lately. Maybe if you got out more, you wouldn't take things so personally." I looked out the window, lips pressed tight. Out more? Like her? Leaving for conferences, for client meetings, flying across the country with a carry-on full of excuses? I didn't want to think like that. I didn't want to be that guy. Paranoid, bitter. But it was getting harder to ignore the hollow parts of our conversations. And that's what they were, hollow. Like she was talking to me because she had to, not because she wanted to. The breaking point came at our daughter's birthday party. Friends and family gathered in the backyard, balloons tied to fence posts, kids running through the grass with cake-smeared faces. I was running around with a camera, capturing everything. It's what I do. Brittany was standing with a group of her friends, wine glass in hand, laughing louder than usual. "Jason's just too good at making himself useful," she said. "I should rent him out. Photographer, babysitter, dishwasher." Real bargain. I froze behind the lens. My finger hovered above the shutter. The group laughed, awkward and forced. Someone glanced at me. I turned and walked inside, set the camera on the kitchen counter, and stared out the window, watching the kids play. She didn't know it yet, but that was the moment she lost me. Not because she insulted me. I'd taken that before. But because she enjoyed it. She basked in it. And I realized I was married to someone who had stopped respecting me a long time ago. And when respect dies, love doesn't stay far behind. The fallout from that backyard moment lingered like smoke in my lungs. I didn't confront her. I didn't cause a scene. That would have just confirmed her narrative, that I was too sensitive, too emotional. Instead, I sat with it, let it seep into my bones while I wiped frosting off paper plates and stuffed trash bags full of party remains. I watched her through the sliding door as she laughed with her friends, basking in that sharp, performative charm she reserved for everyone else but me. The next few days passed like a movie on mute. Brittany barely acknowledged me unless it was to mention groceries or daycare pickup. I kept the house running, handled my clients, edited wedding photos late into the night. The same images of smiling couples, love in their eyes, shots I used to take with a kind of reverence. Now every click, every adjustment felt like a quiet punch to the gut. By Friday, I thought maybe we could reset. Our daughter was spending the night at her cousin's house, and for the first time in weeks, we'd have the house to ourselves. I made dinner. Nothing extravagant, just grilled chicken, salad, her favorite bottle of Pinot waiting on the table. She walked in, heels clicking against the floor, tossed her bag on the bench, barely glanced at the setup. "You didn't have to cook," she said, scrolling through her phone. "I know," I replied, keeping my tone even. "But I thought we could sit down. Just us. Talk." She poured the wine, took a sip, and set the glass down harder than necessary. "Talk about what?" "Cheatingstories. About us." She rolled her eyes. "Jason, you're always in your head lately. Everything doesn't need to be a deep conversation. Maybe we're just tired." I nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe we've been pretending for too long." She looked at me for the first time. Really looked. "Are you trying to start something?" "No. I'm trying to stop whatever this is turning into." She laughed under her breath and picked at her salad. "You're unbelievable." "What's unbelievable?" I asked, hands flat on the table. "That you think your feelings are the only ones that matter," she snapped. "You think staying home and running errands makes you a martyr? I'm out there working 12-hour days, building a future, and I come home to guilt trips and therapy sessions." I felt my stomach twist, the air in the room heavier than before. "You used to tell people I was your rock," I said quietly. "Now I'm just a joke at parties." Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you acted like a man, I wouldn't have to make jokes to survive the silence." I didn't say a word. I stood up, cleared the dishes, and walked in my office, shutting the door behind me. The next night, we met up with a group of mutual friends for dinner at a downtown wine bar. I wasn't in the mood, but Brittany insisted we act normal. The irony of that request wasn't lost on me. Things are fine at first. Small talk, drinks, catching up. Then someone asked about our last vacation, a trip to Maine we took before our daughter was born. I remember Jason insisting we take those hiking trails, Brittany said with a smirk. He thought he was some outdoorsy guy. Ended up with blisters and heat rash. We had to cut the trip short. Everyone laughed. I chuckled too, though I didn't feel it. Another friend jumped in. "You were a good sport, man. At least you tried." Brittany leaned back, eyes gleaming. Tries kind of his whole thing. The table went silent. The wine stopped mid-pour. My smile faded. "What's that supposed to mean?" She shrugged. "Just saying, you've always been more effort than results." "That's not news." I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. "Wow," I said, nodding. "Okay." Brittany tilted her head. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. I'm not." I interrupted. "I'm just realizing something." "What's that?" "That I'm done letting you do this," I said calmly. "You don't respect me, and I've let it slide for too long. But not anymore." The silence hit like a wave. Brittany blinked, stunned. I stood, dropped enough cash on the table to cover our meal, and turned to leave. "Enjoy your night." I walked out into the cold air, the sounds of the city dull in my ears. I didn't know what came next, but I knew this, whatever Brittany and I had, it was cracked all the way through, and no amount of pretending could hold it together anymore. The night I walked out of that wine bar, something shifted in me. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through back roads, windows down, letting the cold wind slap the tension from my face. I kept replaying her words in my head, more effort than results. That wasn't just a cheap joke. That was how she saw me. Not as a partner, not as a man trying his hardest, but as a failure she tolerated for the sake of convenience. When I finally did get home, the house was dark. I slipped into my office, shut the door, and stared at my editing screen. Photos from a wedding I'd shot the weekend before. The couple looked young, glowing, unaware of how quickly love could erode under pressure and pride. I didn't touch the keyboard. I just sat there drained. The next morning, Brittany acted like nothing happened. She breezed into the kitchen, sipping coffee, already dressed for work. "Hey," she said casually, "you left early last night. Everything okay?" "Cheatingstories. You tell me." She didn't flinch. "Jason, it was just a joke. Can we not drag this out?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood, grabbed my keys, and left before I said something that couldn't be unsaid. I spent the day in the studio, shooting headshots for a local law firm. It was mechanical, easy. Smile, flash, reset. The whole time, my mind wasn't on work. It was on the growing knot in my chest, the feeling that something deeper than emotional neglect was happening. It wasn't just the public digs or the private dismissals. It was her phone habits, the way she flinched when it buzzed, then tilted the screen away. The way she said she was on a work call and left the room for half an hour. The way her travel plans changed suddenly, adding an extra day here, a hotel change there. I wasn't crazy. I knew something was wrong. So the next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked her drawer for my spare charger and found something else entirely. A small white box tucked in the back corner, wrapped in ribbon. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was a watch. Not the kind I'd wear, sleek, designer, way above my price range. Alongside, it was a folded card. No name, just a message. Can't wait for the weekend. Napa won't be the same without you. My hands trembled. I closed the box slowly, replaced it, walked out of the room like I hadn't just seen proof that my wife was preparing to run off with someone else. I went to my office, shut the door, and let my breath steady. I wasn't going to blow up. Not yet. I wasn't going to confront her with rage. That would give her control. What I needed was confirmation. Hard evidence. Something undeniable. That night, she told me about her upcoming trip. Just a quick workshop in Napa, she said, scrolling her phone. Networking, wine branding seminars. You know, boring marketing stuff. I nodded slowly. Sound exhausting. She smiled. It always is. I didn't say a word. I just kissed her cheek and told her to travel safe. The day she left, I installed a simple app on the tablet she sometimes used for work, one she always left on the kitchen counter. A simple mirror tool. It let me see the incoming notifications. For 3 days, nothing. Just spam calendar pings. Then on day 4, a message lit up the screen from a name I didn't recognize. Last night was incredible. Same time tonight? I'll bring the Merlot. I took a photo of the message. I waited. I watched. The messages piled up. Photos. Inside jokes. One with her in a hotel robe, holding a glass of wine, bed in the background. My throat went dry. I waited until she got back. She hugged our daughter a little too tightly. Gave me a smile like nothing had changed. Later that night, as I edited photos in the living room, her phone buzzed across the room. I didn't move. I didn't need to, because the next day, everything changed. That morning, I got an email. No subject line. Just this, "Hey man, I didn't know Brittany was married until I saw your anniversary post. She told me she was single. I'm not that guy, so I figured you should know." Attached was a photo. Brittany, in lingerie, wine glass in hand, curled up in bed. Beside her, a golden retriever lay sleeping. The message signed off with a name. A photographer. The same man leading the workshop she claimed to be attending. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my pulse steady. It was time. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not after the message. Not after the photo. I just sat there in the living room that night, watching Brittany from across the room as she played with our daughter, laughing like she hadn't just burned down our marriage behind my back. She was good. I'll give her that. It was almost impressive how effortlessly she slipped between identities. Devoted mother, corporate climber, loving wife. But now I saw it for what it was. An act. When she left the room, I opened my laptop, pulled up the photos from the email, and stared at them. Her expression, the comfort in the scene, the way she held that wine glass like she belonged there, none of it said mistake. It said intention, repetition. She hadn't stumbled into something. She had chosen it. I created a new folder and saved everything. Every screenshot, every forwarded message, even the location tags from her social media posts that didn't quite match the timeline she gave me. I started checking her hotel receipts, matching them against the photos. Same headboard, same dog, same cheap bottle of red on the nightstand. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a case builder. By the end of the week, I had enough to destroy her. But I wasn't rushing it. I wanted it to stick. So I kept playing the part, smiling, nodding, kissing her goodbye on her way to work. She had no idea the man she thought she'd outsmarted was 3 steps ahead now. I called my lawyer, an old friend from college. "Jason," he said after I laid it all out, "if what you're saying is true, this won't be a divorce. It'll be a burial." "I don't want just out," I told him. I wanted to cost her. Her job, her pride, everything she used to look down on me with. He didn't ask why. He knew. "Send me everything you've got," he said. "We'll do this right." I emailed him the files that night, organized, dated, annotated. Then I got to work on my plan. The wedding season was winding down, and I had a few days free. I started curating a photo set, something special, a slideshow. It began innocently enough, photos from our anniversary shoot last year. Brittany had insisted we do something brand-friendly for social media. I had edited them perfectly, posted them with a heartfelt caption. Everyone had commented how lucky we were. Behind every perfect anniversary photo is the truth. That would be the caption. The photos would start sweet, romantic, golden hour lighting. Then, mid-carousel, the switch, photos from the hotel. Brittany in the photographer's shirt. Brittany laughing in bed. The dog curled at her feet. The message from a man would be the final slide. A screenshot. Clean. Direct. I scheduled the post to go live the day after I served her. But before that, I had one more card to play. Her parents. They'd always loved me. Her dad especially. We bonded over football, yard work, the grill. He used to pull me aside and say things like, "You're a good man, Jason. She's lucky to have you." So I invited them to lunch. Just a casual Sunday meal at the barbecue joint I co-owned with my brother. Brittany thought it was just another family thing. I set up the projector ahead of time, told the staff not to say a word. Halfway through lunch, when plates were still half full, I stood up, lifted my glass. I put together a little slideshow, I said, to celebrate Brittany's recent trip to Napa. You know, her big branding workshop. Brittany froze, fork halfway to her mouth. I clicked the remote. Photos of vineyards. A conference sign. A blurry wine tasting selfie Brittany had posted. Then came the switch. Her in the hotel bed. Smiling. Wine. Lingerie. Her parents stared, mouths open. Her mom dropped her napkin. Her father's jaw clenched. Gasps echoed through the room. Then silence. I raised my glass again. Guess she paired more than just wine that weekend. Brittany stood, face drained of color. "Jason, what the hell?" I didn't respond. A staff member stepped forward, holding a silver platter. On it, the divorce papers. I took them and handed them to her calmly. "Here's your next chapter." She didn't move. I nodded to the manager. "You can walk home. This meal's on me, but you're not." I walked out to the sound of whispers and one chair scraping back violently. I didn't look back. That night, I changed the locks. The next morning, the post went live. And within hours, it went viral. The post detonated like a grenade. I thought it might stir things up, maybe trigger a couple of awkward conversations around town, but I underestimated just how viral it would go. Within 12 hours, it had over 1,000 shares. People weren't just reacting, they were invested. Comment after comment poured in. Some were sympathetic. Others were furious on my behalf. A few, brutally honest, simply tagged her profile and asked, "This you?" The studio's inbox flooded, not with complaints, but with support. Couples I'd photographed years ago messaged to say they were heartbroken for me, that they'd always seen me as the kind of man who gave more than he took. Photographers I didn't even know sent messages offering solidarity, some sharing their own stories of betrayal. My bookings didn't drop. They doubled. Turns out, people trust you more when you tell the truth. Brittany, on the other hand, was not weathering the storm. She went silent online. No damage control post. No deflection. Just a sudden disappearance from her carefully curated digital world. Her company issued a statement a day later, something sterile about internal ethics review and temporary suspension. The marketing world can tolerate ambition, but not scandal. And this wasn't just personal. This was public. I figured she'd come to the house eventually. She always thought she could talk her way out of anything. She showed up 3 days later. No warning. Just a knock on the door around 9 in the evening. I'd already anticipated it. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the door, stared at her, and didn't invite her in. Her eyes were red, makeup streaked for whatever storm she'd walked through. She wasn't wearing the power suit or the polished grin. She looked smaller. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly. I stepped outside, shut the door behind me. "Say whatever you need to say," I said, arms folded. She glanced down. "I deserve it. The post, the papers." "I know." I said nothing. She looked up at me. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't go to that conference looking for anything. It just had happened." I laughed once, cold and sharp. "You packed lingerie and stayed in his room all weekend. That's not something that just happens, Brittany." She flinched. "I felt lost, Jason. You were so distant, and I I don't know. I made a mistake. No. Incorrecta. You made a choice. Repeatedly. You ignored your marriage vows. You lied to my face. And when he found out you were married, you blocked him like you were covering up a spill. This wasn't confusion. This was a pattern. Tears welled in her eyes. I lost my job. Good, I said, stepping closer. Maybe now you'll understand that not everything is about appearances. You treated me like a prop. Someone to smile next to while you played corporate goddess. But I'm not a prop. I'm the guy who raised our daughter while you were out building a double life. She sobbed, arms trembling. I didn't want to lose you. But you did, I said firmly. The second you stepped into that man's room and decided your temporary thrill was worth more than your husband, your daughter, and everything we built, you lost me. Silence stretched between us. She wiped her face. So this is really it? It was at the moment I saw that photo, I replied. Now it's just paperwork. She nodded slowly, lips pressed together. Can I say goodbye to her? She's asleep, I said, and she doesn't need to wake up to this. She hesitated. Please don't turn her against me. I won't have to, I said, stepping back. She'll grow up. She'll see the truth on her own. Brittany stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away. No dramatic please. No last-minute apologies. Just the quiet footsteps of a woman who finally realized she'd burned her last bridge. As I stepped back inside, I closed the door and locked it. Not out of anger, but out of finality. I turned off the porch light, poured a drink, and sat down in the silence. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was free. The days after that final doorstep conversation felt hollow in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't grief or regret, more like walking out of a loud concert into absolute silence. My mind had grown used to the noise, the anxiety, the second-guessing. Now, in its place, there was only space. And in that space, a strange calm settled in. I spent more time with our daughter, just the two of us, taking long walks to the park, building puzzles on the living room floor, dancing in the kitchen to whatever song she asked Alexa to play. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to escape my own house. But Brittany wasn't done. Not entirely. It started with the texts. They came in spurts, some short and angry, others long and apologetic. You humiliated me. Was it your goal? I deserve a chance to explain everything to our daughter. You can't shut me out. You were never perfect, either. Don't act like you were. Please, Jason. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I didn't respond to any of them. I read them, studied the tone, noted the shift from rage to desperation, then muted the thread. My lawyer told me not to engage, and I didn't need convincing. I was beyond the phase of needing to hear her excuses. I had spent too many years listening to versions of her truth while swallowing my own. Then she showed up at my studio. It was a Monday morning. I was reviewing edits from a weekend wedding, sipping coffee when the front bell rang. I looked up, and there she was, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes swollen. She didn't walk in, just stood there through the glass, as if unsure whether to knock or not. I met her at the door, but didn't open it. You need to leave, I said through the crack. She pressed a hand to the doorframe. Jason, please. I can't keep pretending like this isn't killing me. I kept my voice steady. You don't have to pretend anything. You made your choice. You live with it. I want to fix this. You don't fix something after you've destroyed the foundation. You just leave the rubble where it is and start something new somewhere else. She glanced down. I miss our daughter. She asks about you, I said. I tell her you love her, that you're figuring things out. She deserves more than that. You should have thought about that when you were slipping into someone else's hotel room, I said, harder now. She didn't respond. She just stared at me like she didn't recognize the man she was talking to. Maybe she didn't, because I wasn't the man she left behind. I wasn't the placeholder she kept on standby while she played fantasy in another city. I was the man who had lived through it, seen it clearly, and stepped out stronger on the other side. I'll talk to my lawyer, she said, backing away. I want to work out something fair. I nodded. We'll do it legally. That's the only conversation we'll have now. She left without another word. And for the first time since the day she confessed, or more accurately, since she got exposed, I didn't feel that familiar ache after seeing her. I just felt done. Later that night, my daughter asked why Mommy didn't come by anymore. I sat her down, looked her in the eyes, and kept it simple. Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love, I said. And when that happens, we have to protect our hearts. But that doesn't mean they don't care. It just means things are different now. She nodded quiet, then leaned into my side and whispered, "You'll always be here, right?" I kissed the top of her head. "Always." The next morning, I met with my lawyer in person. We went over everything, the division of assets, custody terms, all the legal knots we had to untangle. Brittany was asking for joint custody, but not fighting for the house or any business shares. My lawyer looked at me and said, "She's backing down faster than I expected. She doesn't have the support anymore," I replied. "Not from her job, her friends, or her family. She gambled with everything and lost." We signed and filed by Friday. The timeline was officially in motion. By Saturday night, I was out on the back porch, drink in hand, watching the sky shift into deep blues. The same porch I used to sit on wondering if she was lying to me again, if another work trip was really just another excuse to feel wanted by someone else. Now it was mine again. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. And freedom, I was learning, is its own kind of justice. The first meeting between the attorneys was scheduled in a neutral downtown office building, a place with frosted glass walls and expensive leather chairs that try to soften the blows that usually got delivered inside. I showed up early, suit pressed, evidence file in hand, ready to put the final nails in what Brittany had tried so hard to fake as a functioning marriage. My lawyer, Brian, a calm, sharp man with a dry sense of humor and zero tolerance for nonsense, gave me a nod as I sat down across from him. "She's bringing a new attorney," he said. "Not the same one who sent those angry letters a few weeks back." "Let me guess," I replied. "Someone with more experience in damage control." Brian smirked. "Someone trying to turn public disgrace into private negotiation." At exactly 10 a.m., Brittany walked in behind her lawyer. She wore a soft gray dress, conservative makeup, hair pulled back, not her usual boardroom armor, but something more muted. It was calculated. Everything about her was now a strategy. Her lawyer, a woman in her 50s with a clipboard and eyes that missed nothing, gave me a quick glance before sitting. The air in that room didn't crackle, it simmered. "Let's begin," Brian said, sliding a copy of the filed petition across the table. "Our terms haven't changed." Her lawyer opened the folder, flipped through it slowly, then looked up. "You're asking for sole custody. That's excessive, given there's been no history of neglect or harm." Brian didn't blink. "There's a history of deception. My client has evidence of extramarital conduct that includes abandonment of parental responsibility during the affair." "She wasn't abusive," her lawyer argued. "No," I said calmly, folding my hands. "Just absent. 4 days of time. Telling our daughter she had meetings when she was really lying in another man's hotel bed. That kind of absence adds up." Brittany flinched. She hadn't made eye contact once since walking in. Brian continued, "We're prepared to submit photographic evidence, correspondence, time-stamped location history, and a witness statement from the man in question, who contacted Mr. Grant directly and offered to testify that he was unaware she was married." That silenced the room. Even Brittany's lawyer hesitated. After a long pause, she said, "We'd like to avoid public trial." "I'm sure," Brian said. "But Jason doesn't owe anyone's silence anymore." Brittany finally spoke. "I'll accept the custody terms." It came out soft. Not broken, just tired. Her lawyer turned to her, surprised. "Brittany," I said, "I'll accept it," she repeated. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in months, the mask slipped. There was no anger, just something that might have been regret if it hadn't come too late. I know what I did. We signed the paperwork that afternoon. No fireworks, no screaming matches, just pen strokes and the slow closing of a book I had once thought I'd be buried inside. When it was over, I stepped out into the sunlight, my hands oddly light. Brian clapped me on the back. That went better than expected. She knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. Still, most people try anyway. I nodded. "She's tired, and she knows I'm not the same man." She walked over. The divorce was official within a month. The judge reviewed the terms, barely asked any questions. When you walk into court with the truth in a folder, you don't need to say much else. Word around town traveled fast. I wasn't the guy who got cheated on anymore. I was the guy who exposed it, who stood his ground and rebuilt without bitterness. Couples stopped me at the studio, asked for photos that felt real, like they knew I'd see the little things others might miss. The irony of it all? Her betrayal made me better at my job. I knew now how to recognize when people were truly connected and when they were just posing. Brittany faded from public life. She moved to another city, eventually. At least, that's what I heard through the grapevine. Her old firm never reinstated her. The corporate world she fought so hard to impress shut its doors on her the second she lost her polish. The same people who clapped for her success quietly erased her name from their holiday party lists. I didn't feel sorry for her. She played the game, gambled high, and lost. And I was still standing. Freedom doesn't come with confetti. It comes in quiet moments, folding laundry without waiting for someone to criticize how you did it, cooking breakfast without wondering if your silence is being judged, waking up and not feeling like you're bracing for impact. That was my new life. It didn't explode into joy. It unfolded slowly, like the light through my daughter's window every morning. The first week after the divorce was finalized, I didn't throw a party or disappear on a guy's trip. I took my daughter to the zoo. Just the two of us. We wandered through animal exhibits, ate overpriced ice cream, and took silly selfies with zebras in the background. She laughed more in that single day than I'd heard in the past 6 months. That sound, it filled the parts of me that had been scraped raw by betrayal. It reminded me of what still mattered, what had never changed. My photography studio was thriving. The viral post had opened doors I didn't even know existed. Local newspapers ran a feature on me, the wedding photographer who turned a broken marriage into a moment of truth. Couples started requesting me by name, saying they wanted someone who understood what love really means. I didn't tell them the irony behind that. I just smiled and said I'd bring the camera and catch the moments that mattered. I moved into a new place not long after. Not a mansion, not a statement, just a clean, well-lit house on a quiet street with a backyard where my daughter could run wild. We painted her room together. She picked the color, seafoam green. It's like the ocean, Daddy, except no sharks. I told her she was safe now, and I meant it. Safe from the tension, the cold silences, the fake smiles that used to live in our home. At night, I'd sit out on the porch and sip something warm, not always thinking, sometimes just listening. And that's when I started to notice something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had drained out somewhere between serving the divorce papers and signing that last legal page. What was left wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I didn't want Brittany back. I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted my peace, and I had it. One afternoon, while waiting for a client, I wandered into a bookstore down the block from my studio. That's where I met Claire. She worked there, shelving novels and recommending mystery thrillers to retirees. She caught me looking lost near the nonfiction section and offered help. I told her I wasn't looking for anything in particular. She smiled and said, "That's when you find what you didn't know you needed." We didn't rush anything. Coffee turned into conversation. Conversation turned into long walks and laughter. I didn't compare her to Brittany. I didn't need to. Claire was her own presence, calm, curious kind. She didn't try to fix me or ask for stories I wasn't ready to tell. She just sat with me in the space I'd carved out for myself and asked if I wanted to share it. One night, we were watching a documentary, and my daughter fell asleep on the couch between us. Claire tucked a blanket around her and looked at me, something soft in her eyes. "You're good with her," she said. "She saved me," I replied without thinking. Claire smiled. "I can see that. I didn't know what would come of us. Maybe it would last. Maybe not. But it wasn't built on lies. And that made all the difference." Brittany didn't reach out again. Not after the settlement. Not after the post. The silence between us became permanent, and I didn't grieve it. She wasn't a chapter that ended. She was a lesson that finished teaching. And I passed the test by walking away. People still talk about what happened, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in open admiration. I don't feed into it. I just keep showing up for my daughter, for my work, for myself. Because in the end, survival isn't about just escaping the fire. It's about building something better from the ashes. And I was building, day by day, frame by frame. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.